everybody. Today we're talking about deadbeat dads, deadbeat moms, people who refuse to pay their child support. We're also going to talk about ways that you can chase and track them down. Before we left, I know that you had a question or comment to make. Why don't you stand up and make?
All I can say is that if you can't pay child support to your child, leave a note for them. Leave something so that they understand why you're not around. My father left me when I was 5. My parents got divorced. He didn't want to have to pay child support. He didn't want to have to deal with all the red tape. And he split. And for years, I felt the pain of him not being around. My mother, who's with me, did an incredible job in raising me. And the loss was incredible. Always felt the void. You don't realize what you're doing to your children. Yeah. You absolutely don't.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. I guess this is your mom. Okay, what's your name?
Melissa.
And Mom, you're Phyllis. Okay, Phyllis. I guess things weren't there. I mean, you're here. There's not a lot of support today, but 30 years ago, I mean, how did they deal with that then?
We dealt with it in one way. We just worked away and we just took care of each other. That was the answer. And I must say that my children have turned out to be very fun.
Yeah. When you listen to Cynthia and you listen to Bridget, there's another mother and daughter who's just starting to go through what you've lived through for 30 years. What would you say? Any piece of advice you would pass on to another mother? Or?
Well, the only thing I can say to you is the children are the most important part of everything. Whatever happens, that's the most important part, that we nurture them.
I stay with my children. They accuse me of being overprotective, but I am there to ensure their safety, their security, their future, their welfare. That's my job. And my biggest argument with their father is that's his job too.
Yeah.
It's not just the money, it's the absent.
That's right. And it's also not just mothers, as we're learning. I mean, not just fathers. Right. It's mothers as well who can just up and disappear on their children, as we learned from Mike. I want you to meet our next guest now, Diane. Diane says that she and her 4 children once lived pretty much in the lap of luxury. They lived in a big mansion. The kids went to private schools. Each kid even owned their own horse. A real fairy tale kind of life for some that abruptly ended for Diane when her marriage ended. Diane, what happened? How could you go from one extreme to the other? Well, I guess I know how, but just how did it happen so quickly? It
happens quickly when the man just refuses to pay, and he does things to be vindictive and spiteful and doesn't consider the welfare of the children, doesn't consider their emotional state, just leaves.
Just and then, boom, just that quickly.
We had to sell everything, had to pawn everything, get rid of everything. I mean, things, you'd be surprised, disappear very, very quickly. You know, when it's a matter of having your survival, eating and feeding the children and educating. The private schools go, the horses go, the dogs go, everything goes. And on top of that, we were robbed 2 or 3 times with what little we had. So everything the kids had went from the designer-named jeans down to the very well-worn clothes from the thrift store.
That's quite humbling for 4 children who once had horses. How did they deal with this? How are they dealing with this?
Well, when they were younger, you know, of course, children just kind of go through life. They're busy with school and things like that. But as they got older, you could see that the pain of not having the father, you know, it was definitely affecting their lives.
Is he around at all? I mean, there's one thing if you up and disappear, and then there's another thing if you're still around and you just refuse to pay, which...
No, he up and disappeared. I did not find him for 10 years, and I had the...
10 years?
I was contacting attorneys, I was contacting courts, everything. I found him 10 years after the fact, and when I found him, of course, by that time, he was even more bitter than he was at the time of the divorce.
And all this
he had no interest in his children at all.
All of this was against you. You're going to pay for this, the bitter divorce.
That's right.
Nothing to do with the children.
Me and never stopped to consider. And now the children are old enough where now we do know where he is, and he still won't pay. And now they're finding themselves having to seek counselors, and they're struggling in their life. They're not able to hold jobs and just having all kinds of things that are all related to pain of rejection of this parent.
And how much money does he owe at this time after all these years?
Right now, he is $300,000 in arrears at 10% interest.
Unbelievable. Why isn't that man in jail? That's
that
what
man is having a good life. He's got a third wife, and he's enjoying life. Well, we lived in the car, and...
Yeah, I want to get more to your, I mean, living in the car because this jerk won't pay the money he's supposed to. I mean, that's a guy that needs to go to jail, don't you think? We're going to talk to a man who did pretty much the same thing, but he ended up in a Seattle jail. We're going live there to speak with him. He was put there also for not paying his child support. Maybe he can give us some idea what goes on the brain of a man or a woman who would just up and leave their own child. We'll be right back.